Good morning. Well, welcome to you all. Uh, this edition of the Hokyoji Sunday Morning Talks. We've got the community weekend going on down here. We've got little kids running around. It's a joy to hear their voices and watch them for this weekend. It's really nice. Anyway, this morning we have a talk by Ryushin Jan Freier. And Jan is a longtime practitioner who started practicing at MZMC in 1985. He received jukai there in 1988, and he worked as tenzo and other mostly kitchen-related jobs until 1994. He attended Clouds-in-Water Zen Center for a couple of years, and starting in 2002, and in 2016, he became a member of the Hokyoji practice community. He volunteers regularly at Open Arms and Second Harvest Heartland to feed those in need. And Ryushin, greetings.
Good morning. Am I loud enough? Okay. As people have heard my talks before, I tend to go on for a while, but we tend to talk about or teach about what we need to learn. So this is why it's long and complicated. And I'm really honored to be able to have this opportunity. And I'd also like to recognize that Nonan passed on the previous Saturday. And Nonan was a big influence at a certain time in my life. And maybe I'll have time at the end to have a Nonan story. So the topic of my talk today is taking refuge, but it's not taking refuge like so many things in Buddhism is not about what we think it is. It's something else. So, but I'm not going to I'm going to let you figure that out for yourself after all this. So I've worked for years with this phrase from Hongzhi of face everything, let go, and attain stability. And I've used that phrase to get through a lot of hard times, a lot of loss, a lot of grief. And I thought I had a pretty good handle eventually on what it meant to face everything and let go. But I've always had a hard time with attain stability. So I thought I'd reevaluate that, revisit that. So I came across this book, which I had heard about for many, many years, called Radical Acceptance from Tara Brach, written in 2003. So I'm a little bit behind in my reading. But I remember seeing the title as far back as when it came out and thinking, what a great title. Much like the Tibetan book, Never Turn Away. Sometimes just the titles are enough to make an impression. So Tara Brach is one of the four kind of founding Vipassana insight core people: Sharon Salzberg, Joseph Goldstein, Jack Kornfield. And according to Wikipedia, she's a psychologist, an active proponent of Buddhist meditation, and specializing in the application of Buddhist teachings and mindfulness meditation to emotional healing, which is something that I'm seeing in a lot of different therapists who have a Buddhist lean. John Wellwood, Mark Epstein, and there's more and more people dealing with this kind of emotional healing, because the meditation practice, even though it serves as a base, doesn't quite go into the detail and the practice as much as we might like. So the Radical Acceptance book, I read all the way through, which I don't always read all the way through on these books that I start, but the books by these therapists, I tend to, John Wellwood, Mark Epstein, I do tend to read all the way through. And then I was so impressed with Tara Brach that I continued to listen to a bunch of podcasts. And I'm actually using some of the structure from the podcasts to provide this talk because it's a little more organized. She can go into great depth in the book. But it's a long book. There's a lot of case studies, a lot of wonderful transformations. Nobody ever seems to fail at these things. But I think there's a nice organization going on. So first I'd like to introduce the idea that we don't achieve anything through practice. We're just changing our relationship to what's already there. As we learned last week, the things don't really have properties. Everything is just in relation. So practice doesn't get us to awakening. Practice manifests already existing awakening. And I ran across this podcast from the fellow who runs the Winona Dharma River Center. And he quoted Dogen Shinzo, the ever intimate interrelatedness of all creation. The ever intimate interrelatedness of all creation. This sense of intimacy is how we reclaim our world. This sense of intimacy is how we reclaim our world. So every talk should include the three marks of existence: impermanence, interrelatedness, and suffering, dukkha. So mostly Tara Brach defines dukkha, suffering, as Christina Feldman does. Also, Christina Feldman talks about lack. Tara Brach talks about deficiency, how we somehow think there's something missing in our lives, something that's not there, something that would be better. And being in a consumerist society, we're kind of deluged with these messages that, yeah, there's something missing. And if we just bought this or had brighter teeth or a better car or a nicer house and, et cetera, things would be happier, things would be better. So Hongzhi encourages us to face everything, let go, and attain stability. The sense of stability has been more of a puzzle. So the three practices, interrelated practices that Tara Brach talks about in her podcasts is basically an idea of letting go. And they are interrelated, but there's letting go of thought, letting go of resistance to feelings, and letting go of the illusion of separateness, open to a larger field of belonging. So that's the structure of the talk: letting go of thought, letting go of resistance to feelings, and letting go of the illusion of separateness. And sometimes that can be seen as letting go of the illusion of control, that we're in kind of this interrelated, impermanent world, and we don't have nearly the control that we would like. We have a world that we would like to live in. We have things that we would like to have happen. We have things that the way the things are is not the way things we think ought to be. And this causes us suffering, and we want to control things and control people to have things the way we want them to be. So starting with letting go of thought, number one, letting go of thought. This is pretty basic to our meditation practice. This is something we Zen practitioners know we're pretty familiar with this area. But I find it very helpful to think about letting go of thought if we think about the mental system as being a lot of parallel systems. There's a lot of different things going on in parallel and thought is just one of them. Thought has kind of usurped its role as being in charge and in control, but thought is actually, when it comes down to neuroscience, things that come into thought, things that come into awareness are actually thought. Our thinking self is often the last one to know out of all the systems that are going on in our body. Thought is often the last thing to know. So thought, and a lot of thought, we're encouraged to be in the present. And the reason is our thought of the past reinforces this sense of self. The thought of the future about what we should do, how things should be in the future, reinforces our sense of self. If we're just in the present, that sense of self can loosen up a little bit, and we can kind of relax into that a little bit. And there's a sense of ease and peace in that. That's very important for us to understand. There's more what some people call somatic intelligence, body awareness. When we're just being, there's not all this clenching and tightening and holding on to things of the way we want them to be. The many things that could cause us to think that there's something wrong with us, something deficient, something lacking. If we were better at this, if we were better at that. I've been through situations where I thought, if I was spiritually more mature, this wouldn't be happening. But it's like, oh, that's not useful in some ways. It's information, but it's not useful. So there's a lot of different techniques. So the organization of this talk is letting go of thought, letting go of resistance to feelings, letting go of the concept of separateness, idea of separateness. So I'm going to go into the how, and then I'm going to go into the why. So the how for letting go of thought is we focus on things other than our thinking. We focus on our breath. We count our breaths. We go try to put our awareness someplace else other than our thinking self. And by doing this, of course, the first thing that we notice is our thinking self is chattering all the time. This is all pretty familiar teaching. So we pay attention to that. And we pay attention to how things tighten up and how things narrow down. When we're just being, things do tend to open up. Another technique is to put our awareness on some sense system, like hearing. I have ringing in my ears. That's kind of useful sometimes, to just concentrate on the ringing of the ears. And then when a thought comes in, it interrupts the ringing of the ear concentration, and I hear a thought come in, and I can put the thought away and go back to ringing in the ears. Another technique is to just be aware of your body in space. The space that your body takes up, how your body is in that space. Another technique, which is really interesting, is turning what Tara Brach calls taking the backward step. I've heard taking the backward step in different ways, but she talks about taking the backward step as having awareness of awareness, putting your awareness on your awareness. And different teachings talk about this. And what's interesting about this is it's just there. There's no effort involved. There's some effort involved in counting our breaths and following our breath and putting our attention somewhere. But if we put our awareness on our awareness, we realize the awareness is just there. There's no effort on our part to create this awareness. We can't magnify that awareness. We can't diminish that awareness. It's just there. And that's kind of a nice thing to know. And that's kind of a guideline to how we can go about doing things without effort, without the tightening of effort. So a lot of what goes on with this kind of practice is you become intimate with these processes. And this intimacy, this intimacy with just being rather than thinking about things, thinking about yourself. It's different. It's not the everyday world. So that's kind of why we do this. This sense of being present is developing intimacy, and it's also developing kind of a base, a place where we can go. It's not so wrapped up in deficiency, in lack. There's a lot going on that we can just pay attention to that doesn't have lack. So, moving on, letting go of resistance to feeling. This is probably the core of the book, Radical Acceptance. And a lot of different teachers now are talking about this kind of emotional healing, because our culture, especially Western culture, consumerist society, late stage capitalism, blah, 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 we're told over and over again that we lack things, we're deficient, and we buy it, and we begin to buy into this, and it's a hard thing to get away from. So as good spiritual people, maybe we feel feelings of anger, depression, anxiety, restlessness, boredom should not be there, but they are there. That's our life. What are you going to do? And we're told to let go. So sometimes when we're told, and some teachers even say this, let go of anger, let go of anxiety, let go of depression. Well, then there's a shortcutting. This is what John Wellwood calls spiritual bypassing, and what Tara Brach calls premature transcendence. It just doesn't work. These things are pretty insistent. They're demanding your attention. And it's really, from everything I've been reading lately, it's best to cooperate when things are so insistent on wanting your attention. So if you try to let go of anger, you're just pretending. And one thing you learn from letting go of thought is this honesty, this honest base of dealing with who you are. It's a wonderful thing. It's very refreshing in a way. So the idea is not to let go of anger or let go of anxiety, let go of depression. The idea is to let go of the resistance to anger, let go of the resistance to depression, let go of the resistance to feeling anxiety. This is really difficult. This takes some courage because you're going into a pretty uncomfortable space. And so you do it in little steps. You do it as best you can when you can. But there's a couple of things that go on. And one is that this is your life. This is the juice of your life. This is, in a way, this is your nourishment. So there's various teachings that talk about the cracks. The cracks are where the light comes through. We have to find that out for ourselves. We can't just trust that that's going to be the case. But there is the case that dropping our resistance to these feelings, we enter into a different world. We enter into a world of interrelatedness and impermanence. And Tara Brach brings up the point that I've never seen stated quite so firmly, is that it's important for us to know the truth of suffering. It's important for us to know that we hurt. And so we allow ourselves to hurt. And because we've built up a base, it doesn't mean that we're going to act on our anger. It doesn't mean we're going to act on any of these things. We're going to let them, we're going to feel them as best we can in the body. Because the thinking, this is one of the cases where thinking, you can't think your way out of certain situations. You can't think your way out of, you can, sometimes it's helpful, but you can't think your way out of like a sense of helplessness. But I'll talk about that in particular. And there's just, thinking doesn't help. Your thinking doesn't help in all these situations. So one of the problems with getting into this uncomfortable space of dropping resistance is we still have this feeling of this is a bad feeling or this is a good feeling. But mostly we're worried about the bad feelings because it hurts, it's uncomfortable. As long as we have this idea of good and bad, we can't really feel these things completely. We can't really let them be what they are. There's more. If we put they call it valence, positive or negative. If you don't devalence your feelings, you're not really experiencing your feelings. Once you can work on devalencing your feelings, then you really know your feelings and you really do enter this world of kind of a different world. So I came across this a few months ago with Norman Fisher's book on the world could be different than it is, however that title is. And he's talking about anger and saying, you know, people don't want to be angry, but there's times when we should be angry. Well, yeah, that's kind of a different teaching. And he says we should treat anger as information. And I think I mentioned that in the talk once. And there's another thing that Tara Brock brings up from her earlier lessons is whatever comes up is feedback, not failure. Whatever comes up is feedback, not failure. This is the same idea. We're getting information. And whatever comes up, may this serve awakening. So another person who's doing some of this kind of work is a woman named Cinda Rushton. She's an ethicist. She's one of the all-star team of players that Roshi Joan Halifax has at Upaya. But she's an ethicist who mostly works with nurses. And nurses have gone through, and other clinicians have gone through just hell with the pandemic of not having the resources, not being able to do their jobs, not being able to do what they want to do. And she has these concepts of moral residue. Moral residue is not just something that nurses have when they have these memories and fixations of, boy, things could have gone better if. We all have this kind of moral residue of anytime we have a memory that says, you know what, things could have gone better if. And there's this sense of helplessness, especially with the nurses when they don't have all the resources, but there's always a sense of helplessness when you're around people who are very, very sick and dying. And it's like, when I've gone through this has been the hardest thing, the very hardest thing to deal with, is the helplessness. So you can wallow in the helplessness. So this is a case where certain people like Carla McLaren and others have questions when you get this feeling of stuckness when you're stuck, when this insistent emotional state is not going away, that's a good time to bring in some questions. And it's really effective. So this is a time when thinking actually works. So one of the things that Cinda Rushton brings in, when you're feeling the stuck of helplessness, you just ask a simple question: what else is true in this situation? It's not just that you're helpless. There's little things you can do. When you enter this world of dropping your resistance to anxiety, to helplessness, to restlessness, to anger, you enter a world where you hurt, and you enter a world where you want to be kind. This is Buddha's world. And where our thinking selves, our deluded selves, think there's deficiency, there's no limit to this kindness. There's no limit to this love. There may be limits to how well we can manifest this, because we're kind of limited beings, but we can do little things. So these nurses, what else is true in this situation where I'm helpless? They're not completely helpless. Their presence, their kindness makes a difference. It's important to recognize, and it's important to enter that world. And this gets us to number 3, letting go of this idea of separateness, because everybody's hurting. We just don't like to acknowledge it. We like to think we're in control. We like to think we can have some kind of manifestation. And you can have some kind of control. You can do little kind things, and it makes a huge difference. When people are really, really hurting, just the smallest kind behavior is a wonderful thing. And this idea of separateness is, we're all in this world of interdependence and impermanence. You plop yourselves right down in the middle of it when you lose your resistance. So one of the things that I do when I'm not doing volunteer work in the kitchen is I give cancer patients rides to their therapy. And these people are just incredible human beings, because they're smack dab in the middle of interdependence and impermanence. They're looking at their mortality, and they're looking at their interdependence. And one of the interesting things is, this is all arranged through the American Cancer Society, the overwhelming number of people asking for rides are women, because men continue, even in this state, I think men still want to be in control. They want to drive themselves to therapy. They'll make some arrangement. They don't want to be dependent on others, but we are interdependent. And these people they're a blessing for me to be around, because they are managing, they are dealing, they are living in this world of hurt, and they're living in this world of kindness and appreciating kindness. So when we're dealing with feelings, one of the things we want to do is we want to know why we feel this way. Well, Tara Brach talks, if we get into the why, then we begin to get into a narrative, and that brings up this idea of self and self and other situations, and putting blame on ourselves, finding our deficiencies again, finding or putting blame on others. She's not interested. You have to get away from this idea of why we have these feelings, and you have to get in directly into the how it feels to have those feelings. And I told a friend this, and I said, we have to get, she's talking about getting away from the why and getting into the how. And she said, yeah, I want to know how I got to that state. And I said, no, you got how it feels to be in that state, not how you got in that state. But this is immediately the twist. We want to know how. I want to avoid getting into that state again. So I want to know how I got there this time. So no, you actually have to drop resistance at some point. So this state of moving into this kind of Venn diagram of interdependence and impermanence, and knowing that that's where you're living, and that's kind of, you're hurting there, and it's mutual, and but there's a certain freedom in acknowledging all that. And Tara Brach brings up this point of this sense of belonging to this larger body, larger community. And she brings up the point that we have an intuitive sense of this. We've had that intuitive sense all along that we actually belong to something larger. And this kind of gets subsumed or exploited with all the advertising that, you could be in this larger happy community just if you used a different toothpaste that whitened your teeth. Well, it's not the same thing. So this sense that we have this intuition, and this intuition pulls us along into this larger community. So I don't think it's the story of the Buddha before, when he's disappointed in all his ascetic practices, and he's about to sit down and have the determination that he's going to sit until he figures this out. He has this memory of him as a child when he's in the sitting under a rose apple tree, whatever a rose apple tree is, watching men work the harvest. But it's just this gentle, quiet, perfectly peaceful memory. And it's like there's no effort in that memory. He's just being there under the rose apple tree. I don't think that story is in there for a reason, to remind us of that. There's no effort, there's just being. And I remember my dad used to watch the Friday night fights, and he would pop popcorn for my younger brother and I, and we would sit up and we would watch the Friday night fights with my dad. My younger brother and I would both fall asleep. And then he would carry us upstairs to put us to bed when the fights were over. And I remember one time, it was such a wonderful feeling. And I remember one time my dad said, "You're getting too old. You're getting too heavy. I can't do this anymore." And I thought, oh God, this growing up really sucks. I have to leave this behind. But you don't leave it behind. You have these kind of warm, gentle sense of belonging to something larger. So there's something to recalling childhood before all the deficiencies start to hit us. Like my wife, Sandy, always had a picture of me on her computer from like, I don't know, maybe when I was in 3rd grade or something. And she colored it all up. But she always had this picture of me when I was like, I don't know, 6 or 7 years old, whatever. And then when I was taking the house apart, I found a picture of her when she was in like 8 years old. And she's just so happy. And it's like, and living together for so long, we trusted each other enough that child was still available. That child in both of us could come out sometimes. And it's a wonderful thing of this kind of openness, this kind of belonging and sharing with each other, this child before deficiencies. You should see her pictures when she gets to high school. She's very angry and very, very sad. But her picture when she's like 8 years old, she's just the happiest little thing. So I think even the Buddha had this sense that we have this intuitive sense. He had this intuitive sense that there's something out there that I can find, and he's going to go find it. And then the Buddha in the Metta Sutta, I don't know if this is a source material from the Buddha, but it says, basically not arrogant, not without greed for supporters, and should not do the least thing that the wise would reproach them for. Well, who are these wise? Do we go and seek the wise, or do we have this internal sense of wise? I think we have this internal sense of wise. We have this internal sense of wisdom. And I know I know this, and I know that there have been times in my life when I just completely ignored that because I didn't want to pay attention to that. I wanted to take a shortcut. I didn't want to do what the wise would do. I'm gonna do something else. But here it says, and the wise should not do the least thing that the wise would reproach them for. And then there's the in the basic teachings of the Buddha, there's this discourse in Kesamutta, where it's a big trading area. It's a big crossroads. So all these different teachers are coming, and the people are confused about who they should believe and who they shouldn't believe. And the Buddha, in explaining that, well, you have to figure this out for yourself. And you have to know, would these teachings be censored by the wise? Well, the Buddha's right there. Why don't they ask him? No, he's saying you have to figure this out for yourself. You have to contain this inside thing about who you are. Where's your wisdom? So I have a little time. So I'm gonna give a little Nonan story. So Nonan led us 3-day sesshin after Katagiri died, maybe, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 months after he died. And this is after my mom is in a coma, and she's recovered from the coma, but she's just severely debilitated. And it's just breaking me open. The two of those things together. And I go to Nonan in Dokusan, and I've already been broken open, so I'm already beginning to experience this emotional life that I didn't know I had, and I'm crying and blah, blah, blah. And Nonan is commiserating and saying, you know, he really wasn't ready for Katagiri to die. He really wanted to work more with Katagiri. And I said, I really don't know what to do about my mom. because it's just breaking my heart. And he said, and those who knew Nonan was a very large presence. He was gentle, but he could be very forceful. And Nonan said to me in a very forceful voice, "You are Avalokiteshvara." You are Avalokiteshvara. And I didn't quite understand that at the time. And I thought, well, if I am, I'm not a very good one. But this is this idea of giving up the separateness. We allow this wisdom, this kindness in to lead us to this greater world, this belonging to the larger world. We don't become Avalokiteshvara. We allow Avalokiteshvara to happen with us. Nothing changes. All the limits you feel are there. The relationship just completely changes. So I guess that's my talk. Thank you for bearing with me.
Any questions or comments for Jan? Well, all right then.
I have a question.
Go, Mary.
I don't know the word that you, thank you, Ryushin, that was beautiful, beautiful Dharma talk. But I don't know the word that you just said, that you're or maybe I misheard it, the priest. I don't have the history, so I don't know who Noonan is, and I don't know the word that you said.
Avalokiteshvara. Did I mumble that because I was too emotional?
I don't know what that means.
That's the bodhisattva of compassion.
Okay. So can you re-explain that last story using other words? Just say it in a different way.
It's like, it's like you have a certain, you have a certain obligation or responsibility to let kindness flow in certain difficult situations. My mom was very severely debilitated. She had no initiative whatsoever. She had to be prodded to eat. She had to be prodded to respond in any way. She was just, I don't know what the damage was to her brain from the aneurysm and the subsequent strokes, but she would just lie in bed and she would begin to crinkle up. So you just have to be with her in a certain way. And so it's like, this is a recognition of this is who we really are. There's a reason that the Mahayana brought in these bodhisattvas of wisdom and compassion, because every religion brings in some ideal of compassion. Like the Blessed Virgin Mary is not featured very much in the in the Bible. She's like there for the birth, she's there for the death. She doesn't have a lot of lines to say, but people pray to her every day. They pray for protection. They pray for her to pray for them. And it's like, where is that coming from? That's coming from inside. That's, you are the Blessed Virgin Mary. When you do that, you become that. It's easier to think of that as being outside of you, but that's in your world. You've created that. And I started looking at a lot of these prayers, and a lot of them are for intervention or asking for things. And I'm thinking, well, that's kind of weird. That's kind of selfish. That's kind of strange, but that's who we are. So.
Thank you. That was very helpful.
Ken, you're muted. You were unmuted for momentarily.
Yes. Hello? Okay, I am unmuted right now.
Okay.
Okay, and I did not have a question, if that appeared to be the case.
It was Ken, not Kim.
Okay,
Ken, you are still muted.
There we go.
Yes.
Is that better?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. I just want to thank you for that really heartfelt talk. It really goes to the center of things for me. And you're a fairly quiet person. So when you have something to say, you do it well, and it strikes me at a very deep level. And so I just want to express my appreciation.
Thank you, Ken. I've become an emotional person too, which is quite a surprise to me.
Yes, I understand that.
All right, if there's no more questions, then a couple of announcements. Next week, and Dokai will be giving the talk, but he'll be giving the talk. It's the first Sunday of the Jewel Mirror session, so he will be giving the talk that way. And Jewel Mirror is not going to be Zoomed this year. It's just going to be in person. We're, like I said before, we're wrapping up the family community weekend here, and it's been a lively one. We had a lot of rainstorm last night moving through. It's supposed to rain most of today, but it's been dry up in the cities. I heard that Minnehaha Creek had stopped flowing, or at least the falls had quit, so the rain is welcome. So I think that we will just move along here with the four vows. Dokai, you got something?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify, we're not doing Zoom through the session, but next week's Dharma talk on Sunday will be Zoomed.
Right.
For both session participants and also people who want to join online. But that will be the only thing that will be Zoomed, except for also a special ceremony for Nona and Kuwaini. And I believe that's going to be Sunday night, but I haven't made a firm decision on it. But we'll be sending out an email about that very shortly. So thank you all.
All right, then. We'll close with the 4 vows. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. Thanks so much for joining in. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks.